Welcome back to Biz Asia America. Earlier we were talking about the CPC conference and the third plenary announcement in the communique. We're now joined by Sitao Xu, Chief Representative of the Economist Group in China and China Director of the Global Forecasting and Economist Intelligence Unit and Advisory Service from China. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Xu. Welcome to the show. Let me ask you this. What did you think of the communique?
Well, I think it's quite positive. The communique is really trying to driving home the message, which really deepening reform and emphasizing the overarching importance of the market. In addition to that, the communique is also giving strong hint in the area of fiscal reform and urbanization and elevating the position of farmers, so on and so forth. But bear in mind, this is a communique. This is not a roadmap. So a lot of details will be filled going forward.
All right, let's try to guess. Let's try to guess what they're trying to say here. Let me throw up one of the quotes that we're going to put on the screen here. Economic reform is key, they say, and the core solution is the proper relationship between the government and the market, leaving the market to play a decisive role in the allocation of resources. What are they talking about?
Yeah. Well, what we are talking about is in the past 10 years, we have been the shift of dominance, state-owned enterprises, and financial sector reform has been lagging. This is a well-known fact. So the paragraph you have alluded, really trying to address those issues.
Okay, let me put up another one for you. This is great because you're helping us understand what's happening here. Decisive results must be achieved in key sectors in a well-developed scientific procedure based on the effective framework and must be in place by 2020. The way I read that is, I don't know how to read that because I think there's a lot of decisive results. What's a decisive result?
Well, decisive result, just to put a number, by 2020, China is supposed to achieve the economic status on par with the United States at the overall size, not per capita basis. On the per capita basis, China will remain much poorer than the United States. But by 2020, 2025, the size of the Chinese economy is likely to exceed that of the United States. That's also a very important assumption because what the party is trying to tell us is China is very determined not to fall into so-called middle-income trap as many Latin American countries.
Okay, I think that's a fair statement. That we've heard that in the past from the leadership in China. They want to focus very much on sort of progressing that working class and making sure that the middle class continues to move forward. But something that was missing in this statement that a lot of people have been talking about is this sort of expected reform specifically related to the economy, also to land use and land planning and land ownership and housing prices. They didn't really mention anything like that. Of course, we can read into it whatever we want. Why do you think they specifically left that part out?
Well, because they are very complicated, and some of these reforms, of course, they are necessary, but they also face a lot of political headwind. So at this point, it's expected to be relatively vague on those fronts.
Well, it needs to be vague so that we have something to talk about so we can analyze it. But we're going to know much more in about 6 or 7 days when they come out with a more detailed statement. I want to talk about the Shanghai Free Trade Zone for a moment here. This is one of the special projects that the leadership in China has been doing. The special free trade zone basically allows companies, both domestic and international, to be at the same place without having the burden of sort of regulatory issues and taxation issues that perhaps you might have outside of the free trade zone. Is the free trade zone in Shanghai that recently launched, is it as successful as the government leaders have wanted it to be?
We don't know yet. Again, a lot of details will be filled. The progress at this point is for the very first time, China is unveiling a so-called negative list, which means things you are not supposed to do, as opposed to various classifications was encouraged, discouraged. So that's a progress. But of course, to choose Shanghai, which is the most economic developed city in China, to launch this zone really highlights China's a desire to open up the economy and potentially joining the United States in the framework of TPP. But again, a lot of details will be filled.
Do you think when we get those details in a week, do you think there'll be any surprises there?
Assuming financial sector reform is going to be the centerpiece of overall reform, very, very quickly we are going to see whether in those areas, for example, related to capital account transactions, will be challenged and will be tested in Shanghai Free Trade Zone. So very soon we are going to see the answer.
This one of the frustrations from leadership has been their, I guess, inability so far to control housing prices. It's well known that they'd like to have home prices in China perhaps take a little bit of a breather. They haven't managed to do that. They've tried to tax their way into it. That has not worked. They try to limit the number of houses people can buy. That hasn't worked. What's going to work?
Well, clearly what has been done so far really not working. I mean, by my account, there are almost 50 policy packages in the past few years, and none of them is working, and that's a well-known fact. What's going to do going forward, in my opinion, I do think the new government is taking a different approach. Perhaps we are going to see more sort of Singaporean approach and separating housing market into two categories, essentially for the poor, and that means low-income housing will be provided by the state, and middle class and above is going to be determined by market. So I think that's a very, very important sea change from the previous policies.
All right, still a lot of answers to a lot of questions. Sitao Xu, Chief Representative of the Economist Group, thank you very much for coming on our show and helping us understand and read between the lines in the communique.